What I got here is a piece of meat. This is a brisket that I cut in half to make it easier to handle so I can cut it into pieces. But before I do that, I want to cut off a lot of this crappy fat on the outside and the silver skin underneath, as much as possible anyway. And you might be saying, well, you're cutting away all the fat. How are you going to get good burgers out of that? Well, this is not the only meat that I'm using. I also have a pork shoulder that I'll be leaving most of the fat on. And it just so happens that I like pork fat better than beef fat. So like I said, I'm cutting these into pieces that I'm going to grind up. I don't want to mix the two meats together as evenly as possible. And I'm going to put these in the freezer to chill for about 30 minutes. And because I'm making these burgers my way, I'm going to add an onion and I'm going to cut that into pieces so that that can be ground up with the meat. With the meat chilled, I can move on to grinding, and the grinder that I have here is a dedicated one. It's not especially powerful, but it gets the job done. And as you can see from the grind, there's a good fat mix here. And once again, these are burgers my way, so I'm going to add in salt and seasoning right at the beginning, before I make the patties. And I can almost guess what the Shade Tree Michelin chefs out there are thinking. Well, you're overworking the meat here and you're going to get something that's tough. Well, actually, with this meat mix, the only way to get tough burgers is to overcook them. So you don't have to be overly concerned with handling it. But if you are, there's another way to do this. You can mix the seasoning directly into the cubes of meat, making sure they're all coated before you grind it up. So with all the meat ground up in 2 batches, I put it back in the fridge to rest overnight. And in the meantime, I'm making a way to press out these patties that I think is kind of neat. I've got a 3D printer and I'm going to print the parts that I designed. And the plastic that I'm using is just ordinary basic PLA. Doesn't need to be anything special. And if you want to print your own, there's a link in the description to the file you can download. There's not a whole lot to the assembly. I'm just going to glue the knob onto the top. And here's the way it works. The rim is separate from the bottom fits in there, and then the top crushes down the meat. But the meat will stick to that plastic and be a little bit hard to take off without ruining the shape of the patty. And you can use parchment paper, cut out the right size, or saran wrap or something like that. But what I'm going to do is go back to the 3D printer and print out 2 sheets from TPU. This is a flexible plastic. And I can use these over and over again, and they just peel right off the meat. And because I'm going to freeze these, I'm going to put them on a tray that has a piece of parchment paper and then put them in the freezer until they're solid, and then I can wrap them up in pairs. But I did keep one of them out to cook, and I'm going to do that on my wood-fired grill here that I made a few years ago. And I don't think I really need to talk about this anymore because you can see just how good this looks.